Hey, everybody, and welcome back to For the Booze.
For the booze.
The Booze.
For the booze. We're back.
We are. Hope everyone's doing good, having a good week.
Yes, we're back. And this week is going to be a little different. I'm having a hard time with my computer. But we're doing a little bit of something different.
I am excited for this.
And I am going to announce what we may be doing for Halloween this year.
Ooh.
I have an idea for the spooky season. But anyways, before we get into this, I'm going to play a YouTube clip.
Okay.
Okay? And it says, Mom records her daughter's creepy conversation with imaginary friend.
Oh.
This comes from, I guess it's a YouTube channel called TikTok News.
Huh.
Which, I'll be honest, didn't know
Yeah, I've never heard of that.
was a thing. It says a TikToker shared her daughter's apparent conversation with an imaginary friend in a video that has fellow TikTokers encouraging her to move. The TikToker, who goes by Jess, and at Autist Artist On, that's what her name is on TikTok.
Okay.
Shared the video on a Sunday. It's a whopping 2.3 million views.
Wow.
This was, I don't believe this was like now. This might have been, I don't know. Let me look. Oh, this was 2 years ago. But still,
Yeah.
I've seen this clip. It's very relevant to what we are talking about today.
Okay.
And I just want to play this to get us in put us into the mood of what we're going to be doing today.
All right.
So here we go.
No one leaves the room.
Sure. Well, I'm alive. She's sleeping right now. I walked out of the bathroom and I asked her, hey, what are you doing? Who are you talking to? And she said, my friend. And I know she's talked about having imaginary friends before, but she won't tell me about them. Hey, Ava. Do you want to draw me a picture of your imaginary friend?
Yes, but tomorrow.
Okay, what are you doing?
I'm reading my book.
Oh, can I see it?
Sure.
Okay.
These are the butterflies that I trapped in the jar.
So apparently, this lady caught her daughter getting real creepy with her imaginary friends in the bathroom.
Oh, my God.
Now, obviously, today's topic is
imaginary friends.
Yes. Imaginary friends with children, specifically.
yes. Well, I don't know any adults that have an imaginary friend. I'm sure there are, but
Well, no, but I don't know. Maybe an adult could have this type of imaginary friend,
possibly. But
you know?
I'm gonna name drop.
Unwanted.
I'm gonna name drop the title of this episode, and it's the imaginary friends of children. Now, if you go online, this is actually a very popular topic, and there are a ton of videos on a lot of cutesy stuff. You know, like kids are known to have imaginary friends,
Right.
but sometimes it's not always cute. Did you have an imaginary friend as a kid?
I don't believe that I did.
Well, it's odd that you say that because none of us adults, with the exception of maybe a few, can ever seem to remember if we did or not.
I think it's kind of a thing that just kind of drifts away. I mean, I know some people have like super vivid memories of their childhood and things like that. But a lot of people that I talk to, like, they don't remember like a super lot of their childhood, like distinct memories, yes, but never like imaginary friends.
Well, what originally brought us to this episode was a couple weeks ago, we read a story from my sister whose daughter told her about a friend that she had.
Yeah.
who didn't have a face.
Mm-hmm.
We'll come to find out there's more to that story that I don't know if I'm supposed to get into, so I won't, but we've narrowed it down to who we might actually think it is.
Oh, wow.
My other sister, her daughter, I want to read this because I want to get this right, but it was a very strange thing that she said about her daughter, who is now almost 30 years old. But I had asked her because I knew that my niece had this knack for saying weird things as when she was really young.
Right.
And she would predict things. You know, it's very weird.
Wow.
But
I think that's a little more intuitive than just an imaginary friend, but I think that could roll into a whole type of thing that goes on, you know?
Indeed. There's something about children and the way that they perceive things, their ability to see things that we just can't see.
Oh, absolutely. Same with animals. And, you know, I think it's almost like another wavelength that either goes away as you get older, or you just learn more about the world, and, you know, you just become so much more skeptical, or I don't know what it is.
I actually read some stuff that goes along with that really well, actually. That says that, like, there's a part of our brains that develops, like, cynicism, and we become skeptical of the things we hear, and we're just not open about them anymore. But what my sister had told me was, she said, I got one for you. Although, now my niece doesn't remember saying this.
Mm-hmm.
She said on Christmas Eve, or Christmas in the middle of the night, her daughter woke up sobbing about all of the people drowning. And on December 26th, a tsunami hit Asia, or maybe Taiwan, she can't remember, killing a ton of people.
Wow. That is
weird.
Crazy. That's so crazy.
It's not the first time she would do stuff like that. I can't think of any, because this is almost 30 years ago.
Right.
But anyways, so we're talking about imaginary friends. I originally meant to go into this episode looking for just cases of faceless imaginary friends.
Yeah.
But it ended up taking me so much deeper that we just had to do imaginary friends in general.
Wow.
Because I did find stuff about the faceless imaginary friends, but it all tied together back to imaginary friends. And there's a lot on this. I could have made this episode 5 episodes. Easy.
Wow.
Easy. I mean, if you look up stories of imaginary friends and children and stuff online, they never stop. It is never stops. And it's a popular topic on there's a subreddit for it.
Mm-hmm.
There are TikToks for it. There are YouTube channels for
Wow.
it. There are documentaries about it. It just goes on forever.
I mean, that puts a lot of bang behind this whole thing we're going to be talking about. Like, it, you know, making it feel like it's a lot bigger than I think a lot of people, than me, that, you know, myself thought it was.
Well, you know, if you never have experienced it firsthand, I guess especially in the modern age,
Mm-hmm.
you know, with your kid saying creepy stuff, then it probably never really crosses your mind.
Right.
But once you've kind of been, you know, it's been thrown at you at some point, you start to think about it.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing this week, and we are going to go ahead and get into this.
All right, let's do it.
Here we go. As an adult, the thought of imaginary friends is a bit silly, or if a companion to your child can seem almost sweet. But what if that idea takes a terrifying turn? It's one thing to hear your child playing hide and seek with a friend they've made up.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
But what about when you ask questions about their friend, and they tell you they have no face? When my oldest son was about 5 years old, I remember him telling us that he didn't want to go to bed at night. Thinking it was just like every other child going through a rebellious phase, we decided to ask him why. We weren't prepared for what he was about to tell us. He would go on to say that on most nights, a woman would come to his room and visit him. Now, mind you, we had baby monitors with video and we never noticed anything out of the normal. So we played along and asked about her. He would go on to tell us she was scary but not mean. In fact, he would say that she was very nice. The thing my kids didn't know is someone had indeed died in the house about 20 years before, and it was a woman. How do we know this? Because it was my wife's grandmother. He would also go on to inform us that he would see ghosts that would hang out outside of his bedroom window, but never came in. Now, an article we found on WordPress.com about faceless phantoms explains that nearly every culture in the world has the concept of faceless apparitions. Stories of people seen at a distance who, when observers come closer, reveal that they have no face are relatively common. The idea of a ghost with no identity, no face that might explain who this once was, is much more terrifying than a ghost of a loved one appearing at the end of your bed. A ghost you know is a ghost that you can, theoretically, understand or perhaps reason or bargain with. A faceless ghost, however, is simply a patch of pure dread painted on the canvas of the world. Faceless phantoms come in all shapes and sizes. Faceless women seem more common in Western ghost stories, while faceless men and children are a bit more prevalent in Eastern stories, especially Japan. However, there are faceless ghosts of all types in nearly all mythologies. The idea of a faceless phantom is even the source of the popular internet meme known as Slender Man. The ghost or creature is said to wear a silk mask over a completely featureless face, or to simply have no face at all. Becoming faceless is often also seen as losing one's identity, and such images were used in the movie The Matrix to describe Neo's loss of identity when the agents attempted to learn what he knew about Morpheus and the crew. Faceless phantoms are rarely believed to be dangerous, often only frightening people before disappearing. There's no known prevention of such specters, and because there's usually no way to identify the ghost, it's very difficult to understand what circumstances would lead to the creation of such a phantom. Although not all children have imaginary friends, most kids will claim to have an imaginary friend or companion at some point in their childhood. Research out of the University of Washington and the University of Oregon, published in Developmental Psychology, found that about 65% of children have an imaginary friend by the time they turn 7. The researchers also found that the imaginary friend stage often lasts longer than most of us would expect, with as many as 31% of school-age kids claiming to have an imaginary friend. In fact, the percentage of school-age kids having an imaginary friend was greater than the percentage of preschoolers, which was only about 28% according to the study. Children having imaginary friends was once thought to be problematic, with psychologists believing that having one could be harmful to the child. Stephanie Carlson, a University of Washington assistant psychology professor and one of the lead researchers of the developmental psychology study, said, quote,
"Imaginary companions have had a bad rap from psychologists for a long time, and there was the perception that the parents were getting the message that having an imaginary companion wasn't healthy. This finding is fascinating in that it goes against so many theories of middle childhood, such as those proposed by Sigmund Freud or Jean Piaget. Having an imaginary companion is normal for school-age children."
So, the conclusion is, not only is it normal for kids to have imaginary friends, but the practice actually has important psychological and developmental benefits for children. However, whether or not having an imaginary friend gives children an advantage is still unknown, as there isn't much evidence to support the idea that having one makes them any smarter or more creative. But what if there's more to these imaginary friends than just created playmates? Do children have the ability to see beyond what we can see? Is it possible that they aren't making these friends up, but instead are finding them? We've all heard the stories. A television that flips channels on its own.
Want to lose weight and keep eating?
The house that echoes with phantom baby cries, even though no baby actually lives there. A bar stool that scrapes and slides across the floor when no one's near it. Or the piano that plays itself at all hours of the night and day. Quote,
Kids are more susceptible to ghost sightings because they have a much greater sense of awareness than most adults. This leaves them subject to picking up on energies and events that go unnoticed by most. We tend to have a belief that because our kids can't always communicate their thoughts, that they are unaware or unconscious of what's going on around them. This is anything but the case,
unquote, said intuitive healer Dr. Kim Pirano. On the website, theeverymom.com, Aaron T. wrote in saying, quote,
My son was around 2 at the time. We were driving past the cemetery when he said,
Look, Mama, dead people.
I said, Yes, darling. And he responded,
Kids.
He continued, matter-of-factly. And sure enough, we were passing by the children's section. Curious, I asked if the kids were happy or sad.
Happy, Mama,
He said.
They're running around that daddy.
All I saw was a man standing alone with his head dropped. It warmed my heart, honestly.
Mara Doemland, a TikToker and mother of 2 young sons, Murphy and Indy, both began seeing ghosts when they reached 18 months old. While Murphy developed a more playful relationship with the supposed spirits, unfortunately, Indy is still terrified. Doemland said a few nights a week, Indy will spot a ghost in the bedroom and essentially freak out.
Quote, He looks in the corner of the room and says, There's a ghost there, and it's terrifying to see the fear in his face. It makes me scared because he's so convincing that there's something there.
Doemland had to establish a nightmare routine with Indy where she pretends to fight the ghosts, punching and hitting the air until he starts to calm down. Even so, Doemland admitted that it's gotten to the point where even she has started imagining shadows around the house. Creepy experiences like this are prompting parents to ask questions like, can kids really see ghosts? And are they somehow more in tune with supernatural forces than adults? To investigate the phenomenon further, writer Jamie Fisher, who wrote this article, spoke with Jacqueline Woolley, PhD, professor of psychology at the University of Texas at Austin, whose work focuses on children's abilities to distinguish between fantasy and reality. It's no secret kids have rampant imaginations. After all, it's one of our favorite things about them. There is a certain thrill to fantasy and lure to the surreal at a young age. According to Dr. Woolley, between 30% and 50% of children have an imaginary companion at some point in their lives. Dr. Woolley goes on to suggest that many of these supposed ghost sightings may be due to culture. She says that children raised in households that discuss supernatural beings are more likely to identify these experiences as such, while kids who aren't exposed to this sort of talk will be less likely to classify them in this way. And it's no surprise we might be hearing about this phenomena so much lately. A 2022 survey found that nearly half of Americans believe that their home is haunted. While Doemland noted that Indy might not necessarily have a concept of what a ghost is, he likely learned the term from his siblings. Once he first started crying and pointing out things in the corner of the room, his siblings told him that what he was seeing might be a ghost. Since then, he has stuck with the term and run with it. And this phenomena only seems to grow more prevalent during the Halloween season, as the creepy topics become more top of mind. quote,
If you ask a kid if they believe in Santa Claus on December 23rd, you're going to get a higher level of belief than on July 23rd because you want to believe in it around Christmas time. To some extent, that desire does kind of foster belief,
Dr. Woolley explains. One belief in the paranormal community is that children, and even more so babies, are much more sensitive to the paranormal. It's said that this is because they are more open-minded, as they don't have the mental barriers we develop as adults due to exposure to popular culture and the opinions of the general public. Some people go as far as to say that when we are born, we all have a sixth sense or sensitivity to the spirit world, which diminishes as we grow older, become more cynical, and more disbelieving of the paranormal. Of course, it's not just children that claim to be able to see ghosts and communicate with spirits. Plenty of adults report ghost sightings too. And psychic mediums make a living out of communicating with the spirit world. Most clairvoyants will tell you that in order to see or hear spirits, you need to be open-minded, non-judgmental, and free of skepticism. And this is exactly what a child's mind is like. When it comes to children, babies, or really anyone seeing ghosts, we may never know why it happens. Maybe it's an overactive imagination, or maybe they really are tapping into the spirit world. Regardless of what you believe in this matter, when your child tells you they see something, it's startling to say the least. How do you explain your child seeing a person that was gone 20 years before they were born? How do they even understand what a ghost is if they've never been told what one is? Maybe it's nothing, but we will bet you'll be paying much closer attention to all those unexplainable things your child keeps blaming on their new friend.
Oh, man. That was
Rough.
a lot. That was...
I'm struggling tonight.
No, editing. It's fine.
Yeah, no.
But that just made it such a broader thing.
There's quite a wide spectrum to this.
Yeah, and I feel like you didn't even really get a whole lot in there, and that there's just this whole other untapped parts and bits and pieces to all of this.
There is so much on this topic that my part alone, I'm telling you, could have been episodes.
Oh, man.
Because there's so many studies that have come out about this very topic.
Yeah.
There's so many theories that come with it, and there's so many beliefs behind what they are or what they could be, and they go back long before the internet. I wanted to kind of like tap into each little part of it the best I could, within an hour show.
Yeah.
To just give the idea. But what we're going to do differently than we normally do on this show is when we get to your part, we're going to be telling nothing but stories, because there is such an amount of stories on this topic that even doing so for 30 minutes still doesn't even get us close.
Yeah.
There are so many real life accounts of stories of children being creepy that are backed up by other people seeing or feeling or hearing the things also. I wasn't prepared for this. I thought I was prepared for this.
Yeah.
But then when I started to get into it, it was just like there was just so much I could have just kept going.
Such an abundance of stuff. That's crazy. That's so crazy.
And I'm going to tell you, I've written I don't even know what episode we're on, 80-something episodes for this show. This is the only topic that, while I sat alone in this house, this new house we live in, I actually felt creeped out.
Oh.
I'm looking right. I'm dead serious. This is not for show talk. It's the only time I have been creeped out writing a show. And I guess it's because of the stories I had to read.
Yeah.
A lot of them are creepy. There's going to be one kind of a heartstring puller. But there's a lot. And I think it's just because they remind me of our son.
Yeah.
And the things that he said.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. And that little story in the beginning, Booze Crew, was about my grandmother.
Well, yeah, I said my wife.
I know, but it kind of sounded like you were reading an article.
No, that was all from me.
Yeah, I know. It was a very interesting and eye-opening conversation that we had with him at 5 years old.
It was really when things kind of kicked off, like more creepy than they had already been.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, it's something we've never forgot, but he just doesn't remember it. So I don't
He's
know.
always like, what?
Yeah, he acts like he never said it.
Yeah.
But you've got a lot of stories to read, and I guess you'll be able to do so right after these ads.
And now, Booze Crew, back to the scary kid stories. While we may not understand what our children's imaginary friends are, we can all agree that while some stories are heartfelt and maybe helped a young child through hard parts of life, some stories are undoubtedly creepy and sometimes even terrifying. We have searched the internet for some truly spine-tingling accounts of children and their possibly not so imaginary friends that will leave you wondering what is really happening.
Story 1.
When I was 6 years old, we lived in a very old farmhouse that was at the very edge of a small village in the Midwest. My bedroom was on the second floor, and the closet had a very heavy wooden door. The latch was old and rusted, which my mom didn't think was very safe, so we didn't use that closet for anything. Well, I started sitting in the closet at night with the lights on, talking to a nice old man who hung out there. He wore a blue uniform, had salt and pepper hair, and a mustache. I had a name for him and everything. Maypo. I talked to this nice old man about my life, my family, my friends, school, everything. My mom found out about it and forbade me from going back into the closet and told me to knock it off with the imaginary friend because it was freaking my little brother out. Fast forward several years. There was a town meeting to elect a new mayor for the village, and everyone was supposed to attend. My mom brought my brothers and I with her because she couldn't find a babysitter. At the little town hall, which I'd never stepped foot in before that night, there was a photo memorial plaque on the wall for a mailman who had been hit and killed by a truck delivering mail to the end of the road I lived on. His name was Ralph Maypo. He looked exactly the same as my imaginary friend, blue uniform and all.
Story 2.
When my son was first learning to talk, he would tell us about something called Purple Mommy. He described Purple Mommy as all purple with long hair and bright, all white eyes. At the time, he was mixing up purple and black a lot, so he could have meant she was all black and shadowy. Purple Mommy would pick him up at night and turn off the lights. This creeped me out, as we would often find my son out of his crib in the morning, which would mean him crawling over the railing and to the ground at a time when he was barely walking. I definitely found the lights in his room off a few times too, even though he's terrified of the dark. He also explained that Purple Mommy needs bandages because she had blood everywhere. Purple Mommy could take her head off. And finally, Purple Mommy really didn't like Daddy. He told us all of this stuff for maybe a year or a little more, If we ever asked where she was, he'd always point to the same spot, a corner of the room behind his open closet door. He woke up crying most every night during this time. Once, during a really rough night, my wife went to ask him what's wrong, and his answer was, "Purple Mommy won't let me sleep." And this is the heartfelt story that you were referring to. So we just wanted to put it out there. I am going to read it just a little differently.
Story 3.
My son stopped talking to his imaginary friend for months after my nephew, who was 15, took his own life. My son, who was not quite 5, was the apple of his eye. My nephew treated my son like a little brother, and since his mom watched my son while I worked, they spent tons of time together. I had simply told my son his cousin was sick from sadness, and he died. I would remind him every time before we went to their house so he wouldn't pester my sister about where he was. One day, he said,
Mom, you keep saying he's not here anymore, but he is. He sits on my bed before I go to sleep and talks to me.
He would not be dissuaded. This went on for months. He knew things we did not speak about around him that happened. My nephew's grandma, on his dad's side, passed a few months later. That's when my son told me his cousin told him he wouldn't be able to visit anymore. He was going on a train with his grandpa, and they couldn't come back again. The last thing he told him was to never play with guns. They weren't safe. My nephew took his life with a handgun. Wigged me the hell out.
Story 4.
Most of my extended family live around the same area, so we have lots of gatherings. For the backstory, one of my uncles, let's call him Steve, lost a childhood friend when he was about 7. Steve and his friend, let's call him Jack, were having a play date one afternoon and got a bit dirty in some mud. So Steve's mother gave Jack a pair of Steve's shoes to borrow. When Jack's father came to pick him up after the play date, they forgot to put back on Jack's shoes, and Jack accidentally got in the car with the borrowed shoes still on. Tragically, the father and Jack got into a terrible car crash on the way home, which killed 7-year-old Jack. The family had him buried in the shoes he had borrowed from Steve. Fast forward 30 years to a family gathering in 2010. My 6-year-old cousin Sarah is playing alone with the toys in a quieter room of the house. My Uncle Steve comes up to her and asks her what she's playing. Sarah responds, saying that she is playing with a friend. Holding back a smile, Steve asks who her imaginary friend is. Sarah continues to play while saying she is playing with his friend Jack, and that he is sorry he forgot to give you your shoes back.
What?
My uncle's jaw nearly dropped. He had not talked about Jack in years, let alone tell that story to a 6-year-old.
Story 5.
My mom used to tell me the story of my imaginary friend. Well, to start off, my mom used to come check on me in the mornings, and things would be placed into my cot that baby me would have no way of reaching to put in myself. As I got to be maybe 5 years old, I complained of someone knocking on my bedroom door each night. Then came the story of my imaginary friend, a little girl that I would play with. My mom asked me to describe her, and I said she wore a long dress, had blonde ringlet hair, and her eyes were rolled back in her head. Q freaked out Mom. She tried not to bring it up too much, as she didn't want to encourage this friend to stick around. But a few months later, we were sitting on the front room when I started to cry. She asked me what was wrong, and I told her that my friend was sitting on her lap, and that wasn't fair, as I wanted to sit on her lap instead. She never forgave me for the mini heart attack that I gave her. Eventually, years go by, and I have no recollection of this friend, but my mom would tell the story every so often. Years later, when my eldest was old enough to start talking, she would frequently tell me about her other mom, who would come visit her in her dreams to make sure she was okay and to say she missed her. My daughter would tell me that sometimes she would want to go with the other mom to wherever she goes when she leaves. There's quite a few ghost stories from that house that happened well into my early 20s. I struggle to accept the supernatural, but there was a lot of stuff that happened that I just can't explain.
Story 5.
Okay, so this is kind of creepy. I'm an adult that says I don't believe in ghosts and such. But when I think of this experience and wonder what the heck is wrong with me being so stupid, I hardly call it a friend. But when I was younger, like 12, I lived with my brother and his family. We moved to a house, and one of my nieces, who was about 4 or 5, would avoid certain corners of the house. She was scared of the green lady. Pretty much always the same corner in the family room, but on a couple occasions, she'd move. So her big sister, who was about 9 at the time, would pick on her, like throw her toys in that corner. My little niece would avoid it like the plague. Then one day, her big sister pushed her into that corner. I swear, never in my life had I ever heard such blood-curdling screams. Never again have I yet, and I hope to never hear that kind of scream again. She didn't even run away from the corner. She was backed into it, looking upwards. The fear had us scared. My niece never messed with her little sister about that corner again. Friends thought we were joking when they would come over and we would casually say,
Oh, and stay away from that corner, because we're pretty sure an evil ghost lives there.
So when did the green lady move? Here's the messed up part. According to my niece, my brother and his wife were discussing moving out of the house. The green lady did not like that, and at bedtime, she followed them into their room. Another time, my sister-in-law got pregnant, and the green lady got mad again. She moved to the nursery and would stay in there. During this time, we lived there about 2.5 years. My sister-in-law was having twins, but lost one. The surviving twin was born with spinal meningitis and all kinds of other stuff wrong. It was at least a month before he got to go home. Then, my sister-in-law developed cervical cancer. Her mom, who used a walker, fell in the pool and injured herself. And on top of that, we couldn't seem to keep pets alive anymore. We had a golden retriever, a cocker spaniel, a cat, a couple of pet rats, and a guinea pig. The dogs got sick with pancreatic cancer and tumors growing on their sides. Our cat got ran over, the guinea pig got sick, and the rats were fine until my sister-in-law's mom forgot to take the towel cover off the cage on a hot day, and it cooked my niece's rat. We finally moved out, but we all agree, even after all this time, that something was wrong with that place. And whatever that green lady was, she was evil and was probably what made so many horrible things go wrong while we lived there. There's an overwhelming number of stories on the internet of children having imaginary friends. And more times than not, they take a very unsettling turn. Stories of children making some invisible entity they later recognize in a picture from long ago, of someone who died many years ago, or the children who were overheard trying to let their new friend know that killing or hurting others is bad. Are these imaginary friends ghosts? Are they simply just a fictional character your child has made up to pass the time? We have asked ourselves these questions many times, especially since we have our own version of this very scenario. The reality of it is, even after hundreds of studies, psychology experts weighing in on the topic, thousands of articles, and even books on this topic, we will probably never know for sure unless we somehow discover the truth behind the paranormal. But the next time you hear your child talking to someone who isn't there, or maybe start crying because they see something you can't, you'll be wondering if it's indeed imaginary or possibly a visitor from beyond the veil.
So it seems that most of these children's imaginary friends ended up rooted in some kind of paranormal story.
Yes. Like, it's a lot of them had paranormal stuff surrounding them, or what they thought to be paranormal stuff surrounding them in their home.
Yeah.
So, like, it affected, even in some cases, like other kids that would come over.
Mm.
Yeah, it's just.
Well, I did try to go online and I watched a bunch of videos about kids and their imaginary friends and talking to them. And even the videos that I found that weren't necessarily evil or bad or anything, there's one common thing about kids and their imaginary friends is when their parents ask them about them, they don't want to talk about them.
Ooh.
It's weird.
That is weird.
Yeah, because even this cute little video of this kid who drew a family portrait, and it was his mom, his dad, him and his sister, and then his imaginary friend. But when the mom would question him about the friend, he did not want to answer any questions. He would always kind of swerve around the question a bit.
Interesting.
So,
wow.
And then you hear these stories of kids with imaginary friends that are I can't tell you about them. They're evil. They're mean.
Yeah.
And it's what are they really? I mean, that's the whole point of this episode, is that there seems to be a paranormal connection, or is this really just all made up kid stuff? I just don't know.
I don't know either. There's so many different variations of things that go into all of this, I think.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to narrow it down into what one thing it could be, or, a connection between certain things. I don't know. There's just so many variables here.
Well, while this isn't a normal episode, I'm still going to have to ask you. Is it real? But we're going to have to kind of do it a little different. This isn't so much of there's not really a thing of is it real, but do you think these are imaginary friends, or do you think this is a paranormal thing?
I think in most cases of kids with imaginary friends, that they are just imaginary friends. However, I do believe that quite a few could absolutely, definitely have something to do with the paranormal. I think kids and animals just see things and hear things and are just so, I want to say, innocent, which makes them more open to the paranormal and to things that could invite themselves in, or something that they just see that others can't, whether they take it well, they take it bad. I definitely think this has links to paranormal. So what about you, babe?
I think quite the opposite of you. I think the majority of the time it's something paranormal, because like I've said before, paranormal doesn't always just mean ghosts. It just means out of the normal. And I actually read a study on newborn babies and how the way that they can tell things apart is different from how we tell things apart. Because as we get older, we develop this ability to see certain features of each other that, decipher people from one another.
Right.
But in babies, they don't have that. So they'll actually pick up on similarities that we can't even fathom.
Oh, wow.
And but it does go away as you get older. So I believe, just like how like ghost hunters and stuff are running around with this equipment that either records at a different spectrum or takes pictures on a different spectrum, I believe that babies have that ability, and little children before it's gone, that they can see those things that we cannot see, and they have that ability to see these differences in things that we don't pick up on, we can't pick up on.
Right.
So I think I'm not saying that they're seeing ghosts, but I am saying that it is more times than not something paranormal, something out of the normal, at least something out of the normal that we would consider normal.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Maybe it's something that's always there, but we just don't notice. So that's my take. And there's actually, I wish I could remember the name of the article. I would have wrote it down, but it was like this thing where there's 3 pictures of 3 different snails that all look somewhat alike. And they're like, and they ask you in the article, they're like, which 2 look alike to you? And there's 2 that definitely look almost identical. And what they're saying is, no, that third one actually looks more like one of the other ones, but only a baby would notice it.
Wow, that is super interesting.
So that's my take, is that more times than not, it is something out of the normal. But it's one of those things that I don't think we're ever going to truly understand.
Yeah.
And it's not always bad for a child to develop an imaginary friend. Like I said, there are some benefits to it. It's just sometimes, honestly, more times than not, it seems like it takes a weird, dark turn.
Yeah.
And there are tons of videos that you see of these little kids talking to their imaginary friends, trying to convince them to not kill people, or please don't make me kill people.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, stuff like that. And I actually saw I didn't watch it, but there was a video on YouTube about a little girl, imaginary friend. She ended up killing people.
What?
Because her friend told her to.
Stop it.
I'm telling you, man, this is a weird topic, and it all sprouted because because our son told us about seeing a ghost.
Yeah.
And then my sister listening to that episode that he said that on years later, or like a year and a half later, and then telling me about her daughter's experience. And then it just kind of snowballed into this. Now, you were right, like, especially in my part, like, it was very hard for me to touch on all the topics, so this might actually be one that we come back to.
Okay. I'd definitely be into that.
I would like to dig a little deeper into this and maybe find some more stuff, because this is a very interesting topic, because this is like, it's, we're used to doing locations, but I think we're going to start spanning out, do some other stuff now.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if you like the locations, don't worry, they're not going anywhere.
They are not.
They're
They
not
are.
going anywhere. That's
They
our
are
thing.
our thing for
Yeah.
sure.
And oh yeah, I wanted to say, so for this Halloween, I've actually been thinking about reaching out to other paranormal podcasts and asking them, what is the most haunted location that you know about where you are, and doing those for Halloween and touching on.
Super cool.
Yeah, so maybe we could even have some of their takes on these places, since they know them well.
Yeah.
And maybe we can, maybe some of our listeners can find some new paranormal podcasts that they like through this.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I've already got one.
Nice.
Yep,
Heck yeah.
going to Pennsylvania for one. So, I mean, that's the topic. That's kind of it. So, I mean, there's really you're not going to get a definitive answer from us on this one, because
Yeah.
there's just too much to this.
It's too vast. It's too open. And honestly creepy.
Maybe in the future we'll do a series on this, more like, what are the faceless? What are the spiritual ones? What are the evil ones?
Well, because then you have like the black-eyed children. And,
Oh, God. We're going to do that one day.
And like things, things that kind of branch off of that. And I mean, just so many things involving kids, and it's just crazy.
Well, the black-eyed children one is one I think we've been talking about doing that since we started this show.
Oh yeah. But
it's another kind of big one. I mean, the ones that aren't locations, they take me a little bit longer, just because it's different research in these kinds of things.
Right.
There's so many more theories and stuff involved. But we're going to start doing some other stuff. But anyways, I'm going to keep talking in circles. Where can they find us?
They can find us on Instagram at @forthebooze_podcast and on Facebook at For the Booze.
You can also find us on YouTube at For the Booze. I don't know why I did it backwards, but then you can find us on Twitter at For the Booze. And don't forget to come check us out on Twitter, where we're making Twitter or TikTok videos.
Yes.
Yeah.
TikToks.
Great.
The tickety talkies.
And don't forget, if you have a paranormal story, even if it's not about you, maybe it's about somebody you know, write it into forthebooze12@gmail.com, and we'll read them on the show, along with any location suggestions that you may have.
Absolutely.
And one more important thing that they should do is
rate and review.
5 stars.
Yes, 5 stars. Leave a comment. Say hi. Say whatever. Say what kind of car you drive. I don't care.
Yeah, that would be nice. I like cars too. I guess that's it. I guess that's where we're going to leave it this week.
Well, thank you, everybody, so very much for listening. And we will see you in the next one.
Bye.